Together, we work as one for better LGBTIQ lives. Outright.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Maria Schöden. I'm the Executive Director of Outright International, and it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to this panel today. For those of you who are new to Outright, we are a 32-year-old organization dedicated to working together with our partners for better LGBTIQ lives around the world. We have staff in over 12 countries and our global headquarters in New York City, the same city as the United Nations, where we do a lot of our work. We achieve our mission through four ways, you can say. We amplify by providing platforms for our partners to speak on their own behalf. For example, using our new program, LGBTQ Connect, that makes queer women and queer women activism more visible. We support by training, funding, and strategic advice. For just as an example, since the start of Russia's war on Ukraine, we have distributed over $2 million to partners in Ukraine and surrounding countries. We advocate convincing decision makers that change has to happen. That's necessary. That's how we change the world. And we celebrate when our movement makes progress, including yesterday when the news came out that Barbados is the third Caribbean country this year alone to decriminalize same-sex relations, something that would not have happened but for the efforts of Outright partner ECADE in the Eastern Caribbean. This is our 8th year hosting Out Summit, and we are so glad you could join us to build community, learn about and share trends in our movement, and develop strategies together to push forward. We all know there is a lot to do in the world to ensure safety and dignity and justice for LGBTIQ people. Before we get our panel started, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the Anita Mae Rosenstein Foundation, which is one of our Out Summit sponsors and our presenting partner for today's panel. Anita and the foundation are longtime supporters of LGBTIQ causes, and we're thrilled to have their support for this conference and for this important conversation. I also want to share a few housekeeping items, if you will. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, pronouns, and where you're from, so we can connect with each other. And we'll be opening the conversation to questions later in the program. So you should feel free to post any questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window, and then we can address them as we go along. Today's program is exciting for a number of reasons. First, the journey to full LGBTIQ rights and equality has very far to go in every country. And notably, the LGBTIQ movement is severely under-resourced. Despite the lack of resources, in the last few decades, the movement has greatly accelerated legal and social progress, thanks to the tireless efforts of activists and advocates and the support of donors that have invested in this work. And we know that over the next several years, we can rapidly advance human rights and equality for queer and trans people globally, depending on how we mobilize right now and how we involve new friends and allies. Progress can be faster and it can be greater, but it must be resourced. So today's panel aims to tackle how philanthropy can broaden the base of support for global LGBTIQ movements, why this is the moment for allies and new funders to invest in this work, and why and how donors who care about human rights, gender equality, the sustainable development goals, equity, social justice, and intersectionality should support queer and trans organizations. That's just the tiny bit of a topic that we're going to try to cover today. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. I won't read their full bios, but they are on the Zoom session page. So we're very honored to be joined by a leader in the global movement for the rights of Indigenous women and channeling philanthropy to end structural inequalities. Monica Alleman International Program Director for Gender, Racial, and Ethnic Justice at the Ford Foundation, which has been a key partner with Outright over the years. Elizabeth Barajas Roman, President and CEO of the Women's Funding Network, who has been leading progressive movements, including advocating for immigrant women and their families for more than 20 years, and an outspoken champion for the intersection between gender equality and LGBTIQ rights. Tina Lee, the Director and Head of Social Impact and Sustainability at Dropbox. Through the Dropbox Foundation, Dropbox has generously partnered with Outright since 2021 as part of the company's commitment to global human rights and LGBTIQ equality and inclusion. And Tiffany Namtu, Director of Content and Social Media for the Ariadne Getty Foundation, who is communicating and connecting organizations across the world. So let's kick off the conversation. Thank you. I mean, I really could not be more grateful to all of you for being here. So let's start with an easy question, if you will. Why don't we go through each of you, and you can tell us briefly about your role, your organization, and why the global LGBTIQ movement is important to you personally. Tiffany, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Namtu, and I am the Director of Content and Social Media for the Ariadne Getty Foundation. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here. So AGF was founded in 2004, and we work with partners worldwide to improve the lives and communities through financial investments and social activism. Personally, I'm very passionate about the LGBTQIA+ community. I feel like everybody should be able to live as their full authentic selves. Of course, LGBTQIA rights are human rights, even though they are not always treated as so. And my sister is also trans, and a lot of my chosen family is part of the LGBTQIA+ community. So that is why it is very important to me.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Tina, let's go to you next.
Great. That was a great introduction, by the way. Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Outright, for having me at the summit. I'm really excited to be here. I lead Dropbox's social impact and sustainability team, and I have the privilege of leveraging both philanthropy and corporate resources to advance the Dropbox Foundation's mission, which is to support organizations working in human rights, fighting for equal opportunity, basic freedoms, and fundamental necessities for people around the world. The global LGBTIQ movement is important to me because I'm raising two young sons at home, and we talk about gender equality at home constantly. What does it mean to them? How do we think about it? How do we treat each other with respect and dignity? But also how we can be more equitable to each other. How do we make space? We need to elevate these voices that need to be heard, especially in countries and cultures where it is still discriminating against. That's where we can be making an impact through financial support and advocacy. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Tina. Elizabeth, let's go to you next.
And thank you so much, Maria. This is Elizabeth Barajas Roman. I'm the President and CEO of the Women's Funding Network. And the Women's Funding Network, if you're not familiar, empowers a deeply intersectional movement that fights for the policies and standards across lines of race, class, gender, and is the largest philanthropic alliance in the world dedicated to advancing the essential role of gender justice funders in the unwavering fight for equality and opportunity. So it's deeply aligned with my own personal journey, as well as a Latina, as a first generation immigrant's daughter, also someone of the LGBTQ movement as well, personally identifying as that. And so it is something that you can extract one identity from the other. And that's something that, again, I know personally, and as something that we move forward in our work as well. We don't live single issue lives. And it's certainly the advocacy that we need to do to empower, again, equality and opportunity means not pulling these identities apart. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And Monica, finally, let's hear from you on this question.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation. If you are okay, can I speak in Spanish? Yes. Yes.
It's
we
all,
have-
yeah,
yeah?
great, yes, go ahead.
Bueno, muchas gracias y me da mucho gusto estar presente en esta conversación. Yo soy Mónica Alemán y trabajo en la Fundación FOR como directora del programa de justicia de género. Y estoy en esta conversación porque creo profundamente en la dignidad de las personas y creo que todos los seres humanos tenemos que tener el derecho a vivir una vida digna, ¿verdad? Particularmente aquellas comunidades que han sido excluidas de forma histórica, particularmente la comunidad LGBT. Así que estoy aquí porque a mí me interesa mostrar la solidaridad personal, pero también el compromiso que debe expandir la Fundación FOR en este proceso, ¿verdad? De consolidar los derechos por un mundo diferente, ¿verdad? Gracias.
Thank you so much, Monica. It was so interesting to hear all four of you, and it brought to mind what our keynote speaker from this morning, the Argentinian Special Envoy for LGBTIQ rights, Alba Rueda, said, when rights are recognized, the whole society moves forward. So let's go to some more concrete examples of projects or partnership that you're involved in that you want to highlight, that maybe can shed a light on how and why your organization invests in and support LGBTIQ rights and causes, and why you think, through that lens, a global focus is important. Let's maybe switch up the order a little bit. Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you again. So our organization, as I mentioned before, is an organization that was founded with the idea around intersectionality. We can't have gender equality until people of all gender identities and gender expressions and sexual orientations are really emancipated from the oppression of violence and misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia. We really see our work as anti-oppression work. And so from that lens, we are deeply, really just centered in this idea that we all need, we're not free until all of us are free. The WFN has invested in this work for a variety of different ways. One as leading a membership organization of 130 different gender justice funders throughout the world, really centering the learning and the cross-learning around this issue from a variety of different places. Again, as you mentioned, Barbados, there's so many different contexts in which oppression operates, but what we found that unites all of us is some of the tactics, some of the ways that people can stand up and learn from each other and also gain strength from each other. So for that reason, WFN is committed to doing a lot of co-convening. We've done co-convening with Funders Reproductive Equity, Funder for LGBT Issues. These co-convenings are really about saying, there may be places where it makes sense to really kind of find your home, but when we do things together, we learn together, we gain understanding from a broader context. Another example of the partnerships that we've done is really thinking about some of the issues that are really resonant today. For example, in the United States, the pulling back of reproductive rights in the United States. We took that as an opportunity to work with partners to build something that we're calling the Bold Pledge for Reproductive Rights and Justice. And in that moment, we saw it as an opportunity to again center this work as anti-oppression work and really look at the places of solidarity around where these attacks are coming from, really from a place again of oppression, but also in a place of looking to pull away bodily autonomy. And so we crafted a pledge that now has, I think, over 800 different funders that have signed on. Again, thought it was important not just to say the funders were going to move money into this space of anti-oppression, pro-bodily autonomy, and all of the different organizations that are working in that space, but to say how they did it was also important. And the how also included listening from the ground up. It involved moving the decision-making into the hands of those most impacted, and a variety of other really feminist values that move across different sectors. So those are just a couple of ways we've been bringing this into some of the partnerships that we do across the globe.
Thank you so much. Monica, do you want to take on this question next, as coming from an institution that has been such a strong supporter of LGBTIQ rights globally for a long time?
Sí, muchas gracias. Bueno, la Fundación Ford tiene una larga historia de trabajo en los derechos humanos, ¿verdad? Y tiene una larga historia de trabajo en la justicia de género. Y yo creo que a través de esa historia hemos logrado demostrar que el tema de la justicia de género es un tema fundamental, ¿verdad? Y ya como decía Elizabeth, muy bien, no se puede lograr la justicia si no se logra la justicia de género, ¿verdad? Yo creo que nuestro compromiso con el movimiento LGBT ha sido variante a través de los años, ¿verdad? Creo que han habido momentos donde hemos invertido más recursos y han habido momentos donde hemos dejado de invertir recursos, ¿verdad? Las dos cosas son verdad viniendo de la Ford. Lo que sí puedo decir es que existe un compromiso interno de reconocer, ¿verdad?, estas fluctuaciones que han habido en cuanto a nuestra inversión, ¿verdad? Pero lo que no ha pasado es que nunca hemos dudado de la importancia de este trabajo, ¿verdad? Nuestros recursos han fluctuado, pero nuestro compromiso nunca ha fluctuado, ¿verdad? Y estamos en un momento diferente como fundación, en un momento donde estamos reconociendo la necesidad de volvernos a plantear sobre la mesa cómo trabajamos y cómo invertimos en este tema, pero también de forma específica cómo invertimos y cómo trabajamos el tema del impacto que está teniendo esta agenda antigénero contra la comunidad trans. Y en ese contexto, pensando de forma más concreta cómo podemos atender la necesidad y el llamado a la urgencia de responder a la comunidad trans, ¿verdad? Nosotros trabajamos en 3 niveles. Por un lado, nuestros donativos o nuestro grant making, ¿verdad? Y se ha dado una orientación clara a todo el personal de Ford de que nuestro grant making tiene que tener un lente de inclusión y que la comunidad LGBT debe ser una comunidad a la cual todos los programas de Ford deben entender y en la medida de lo posible priorizar, y dentro de ese contexto poner especial atención a la situación de la comunidad trans. Un segundo nivel de trabajo para la fundación es en cuanto a nuestras operaciones, ¿verdad? Nosotros hemos revisado la forma en que Ford contrata y retiene personal y se ha hecho un llamado específico, ¿verdad?, a cambiar la cara de la Fundación Ford. Por lo tanto, hemos introducido políticas para la contratación de la comunidad LGBT en nuestro personal, porque creemos que es importante tener esa perspectiva dentro del personal de Ford. También hemos hecho un esfuerzo excesivo en cuanto a las políticas laborales para las personas que pertenecen a la comunidad LGBT. Y tercero, ¿verdad?, yo diría, es en cuanto a nuestra comunicación. Hemos tomado una decisión de que a partir del 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, no vamos a guardar silencio frente a las opresiones que está viviendo esta comunidad y que íbamos a salir, ¿verdad? Un poco del closet, ¿verdad? En el que habíamos estado, donde a veces no siempre decíamos públicamente lo que sentimos, y lo que sentimos es que esta comunidad pues está siendo afectada de una forma particular y que por lo tanto debemos estar en solidaridad sin poner en duda, ¿verdad?, los derechos que tienen. Obviamente nuestro brand making varía, ¿verdad? Estamos apoyando a instituciones como los Donantes Unidos por las Comunidades Trans, como a Astrea y a otras grandes entidades, pero me detengo ahí por ahora.
Thank you so much, Monica. Really appreciate you reflecting on the institution, the Ford Foundation itself and its practices. Tina, do you want to go next?
Sure. So from its inception in 2018, the Dropbox Foundation is rooted in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Supporting LGBTIQ causes is one part under our human rights umbrella, but it's a really important one, and we recognize it's an under-resourced one. So we adopt a multi-year giving approach and provide unrestricted funding to global nonprofits. Furthermore, we have over 3,000 employees around the world. And so I personally look at how I can tap into that as a resource. How can I mobilize my employees to support this movement, for example? We have employee resource groups across the company. And so Pride Box is actually one of our most active ones. There's a time for education, there's a time for advocacy, there's a time for just being in community. Many of our ERGs celebrate a Heritage Month. And so working with ERGs across the company, across employees, Pride is really celebrated. So that is a very a concrete example of how I leverage the employees. We've been supporting Outright, like you said, since 2021, and we've been so pleased and happy to be supporting this work. Funding global organizations align with how we think about leveraging our resources, right? So I think about the foundation, but also the corporate side. Dropbox and the foundation support the UN SDGs, and we actively work on integrating 4 of the key goals into our business operations and philanthropy. So number 5, gender equality, number 10, reduced inequality, number 8, decent work and economic growth, and number 13, climate action. The foundation, like I said earlier, is not the only place to support LGBTIQ rights. As a global company, we are committed in fostering inclusive values and culture. So supporting a global nonprofit like Outright helps to align with our footprint as well. And since we place an importance in leveraging our employees for skills-based volunteering, it is helpful to partner with an organization with a wide reach like yourself.
Thank you so much, Tina. Leveraging the corporate side of things is something for me personally that's been quite new since the last few years here at Outright, and I really see the value also because it engages a lot of people across your company, for example. And finally, Tiffany, let's go to you.
So Ariadne Getty has 2 queer children. So of course, the LGBTQI+ community is very near and dear to her heart. She also acts as kind of an adoptive mother to all of her children's friends as well. Everyone refers to her as Mama G. So of course, the movement is very near and dear to her heart. Most recently in 2021, the Ariadne Getty Senior Housing opened. It's a 98-unit affordable senior housing community in Hollywood, California. And that's in collaboration with the LGBT Center in Los Angeles. She also has a youth academy, the foundation does, and has also done a lot of work with GLAAD. In 2020, made a very generous donation to help with launching the Media Institute with GLAAD. So of course that's working at home, but also of course media is a much broader scale, so that would go globally. Also, most recently in the last year, through social media, from Monday to Friday, the world news, LGBT news, is posted on on the Ariadne Getty Foundation's Instagram. So, it's just a way to get the news out there to people, because there's nothing more important than educating yourself and knowing really what is out there. So if that can even, reach a few people, and then, we all know how social media works. It just kind of bounces further and further. And it's so important to have a global focus, because if any part of the community is left behind, whether it's some places will say, oh, okay, yes, you could be gay, but maybe it's not okay to be trans, or it's okay to be trans, but I don't know about the gay stuff. So it's really important, because if any part of the community is left behind, then we don't have the community. The community is not whole. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I could not agree more. And especially at this time when we see globally a huge and unfortunately quite dangerous pushback, especially against trans people and human rights for trans people. And it's coming from so many different ways. And this leads into the next question that I want to bring up. How does funding LGBTIQ work intersect with and complement your other priorities? Some of you have touched upon this a little bit, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper into this, like how it aligns with your funding on women's rights, gender equality, human rights, addressing structural inequalities, etc. Like how do you bring an intersectional lens to your funding? Tina, do you want to kick us off here?
Sure, of course. We certainly apply an intersectionality lens when we approach the foundation's funding priorities. Like I said, we look to support a global nonprofit for 3 years, actually. And so building upon trust-based philanthropy, we really want to empower the nonprofit. Like you are the practitioners, you are the experts in this field. You tell us, right? And so in terms of what's the biggest need. So for us, there isn't silo pillars of program areas. Under human rights is pretty, for us, in some ways, it's pretty flexible that we can fund different nonprofits as long as there's a tie-in to human rights. But there's also a lot of overlap that we see, like funding youth rights organizations with an overlay of supporting LGBTIQ communities, for example. Just to go back and kind of further repeat the point earlier, at Dropbox on the company side, we really work with our diversity teams. It's a different team, separate from social impact, and that they manage the ERGs, but there's definitely company-wide commitment from the very top to uphold diversity, inclusivity, and allyship. The ERGs are a place for community and allies to learn, listen, and to be in community. While the foundation can provide the financial support for the LGBTIQ nonprofits, leveraging the employees, bringing in other local nonprofits, for example, or global nonprofits, having a lunch and learn, having volunteering opportunities. How do we using our corporate brand, for example, to advance the LGBTIQ movement is really important. So we think about all of these opportunities to really galvanize and to support across the company.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth, I feel like this is a question where you're jumping to jump in.
Thank you so much. Well, I think one of the things that we start off with is kind of thinking about what the other side is doing, right? It's been really insidious, the type of connections that those who seek to restrict and push back rights are doing to expand their influence. They are learning together, they're coordinating, they're co-funding, they're expanding their sophisticated kind of mechanisms to bring people in to the side of really, again, stopping, pushing back, and really bringing us to a place of crisis around rights. And we're being outspent. As funders, we're being outspent by hundreds of millions of dollars each year. And what we see is that we just, in terms of how we're trying to bring the women's funding network and the gender funders together to really think about how is it that as a community, as a philanthropic community, we are called to recognize the scale of this fight. and that we need to be both rigorous and creative in our response. We also need to be working collectively. You know, we need to match not only the dollars, but we need to match the learning, the co-funding, the spending power, the institutional knowledge, and the collaborations. Really, we need to match that in order to transform the kind of the position we're in now. That's the only way to be able to leverage our collective power, and because we are in a place of crisis. And so again, acknowledging kind of what we're up against, and acknowledging that, again, it's not just dollars. No, not a single one of us can do this on our own. And it's time to come together to do that.
Thank you so much. And I mean, what you're touching upon here, the sort of the opposition, those who do not want LGBTIQ people to be granted our human rights, even though the Declaration of Human Rights is universal, they, of course, have a lot more money than our side, if you will. And it's kind of ironic that one of the arguments often used around the world really is claiming that we have the money, or that we're paying people to somehow become gay, or, you know, whatever. But it's yeah, all of us who know the numbers know that there's no truth. There's no truth to that at all, actually. Tiffany, do you want to say a little bit about sort of how the different priorities are aligned or come together?
Yeah, so the Ariadne Getty Foundation has also done a lot of work with the UN as well. So I think it just goes back to that human rights thing. You know, LGBTQIA rights are human rights, and they do not receive the respect, or they just don't have those basic rights, whether it's marriage equality, whether it's being able to be just who they are, jobs, anything like that. So being able to fund LGBTQIA plus, it goes right back to the human rights stuff and just all kind of intertwines together.
Thank you. And Monica?
Yo diría que sin duda esta es quizás el área de trabajo más complejo para nosotros, ¿verdad? Porque por un lado, nosotros como fundación, yo diría, entendemos lo que significa la identidad de género, entendemos lo que significan las expresiones de género, qué significa la orientación sexual y qué significan las características específicas de sexo, ¿verdad? Y tratamos de tratar cada una de esas complejidades de una manera diferente, ¿verdad? Por un lado, como decía antes, nosotros hemos dado orientación a nivel de nuestro grant making de que es importante que la población LGBT sea considerada una población de prioridad. Ahora, existe un riesgo con esto, y el riesgo es que en el esfuerzo de transversalizar o de mainstream, ¿verdad? Nosotros invisibilicemos, ¿verdad?, a ciertas comunidades por el esfuerzo excesivo de transversalizar, ¿verdad? Entonces tenemos que tener mucho cuidado entre lo que significa transversalizar y dar una orientación de tratar a esta población en su generalidad, y a la misma vez, ¿verdad?, entender que hay situaciones y necesidades específicas y hay un movimiento, ¿verdad?, que hay que apoyar. Entonces yo creo que esa es lo que estamos constantemente navegando. Yo diría que hemos hecho un esfuerzo donde hemos avanzado en transversalizar, pero que todavía como fundación quizás tenemos un camino por recorrer en entender el poder del movimiento y de las necesidades específicas de este movimiento. Y creo que no tenemos que apurarnos en este proceso, ¿verdad? Porque las dos cosas son importantes. Es importante entender las necesidades de la población LGBT dentro del tema de recursos naturales, dentro del tema de espacio cívico, dentro del tema de violencia de género, pero también es importante entender el poder político y social de este movimiento, ¿verdad? Y de invertir en este movimiento. Y yo creo que esta segunda parte es algo que necesita mucha más atención dentro de FOR, pero también fuera de FOR, ¿verdad? Y que es la parte que creo que todavía no logramos entender a profundidad, diría. Creo que lo entendemos hasta cierto nivel y por eso seguimos invirtiendo en esfuerzos variados, ¿verdad? Pero todavía nos hace falta camino por recorrer en cuanto a entender el poder de este movimiento como movimiento y no solo como población específica. Así que los programas lo integran, pero yo pienso que falta todavía entender el poder del movimiento, por ejemplo, dentro de los temas y no solo como población.
Those are very wise words, Monica. Thank you. I mean, as someone who has been an LGBTIQ activist of sorts for almost 25 years, I mean, I've sort of seen the shift that, you know, it used to be that HIV/AIDS funding was like almost the only kind of funding available for any of this work. And everyone was just trying to squeeze any kind of work into that framework. And then gradually human rights funding has become more available, which is great and it's necessary. And human rights are really the foundation, I think, of a lot of this work. But of course, our movements and our populations are affected by every other kind of issue as well. And I think we're only just really starting to push for not just mainstreaming, but also specific programs and funding available to do work around democracy and access to civic spaces and all of the fighting gender-based violence, all of the issues that are critical to work on in parallel. And all of this is happening, of course, while our movements are growing. So while the tracking of the funding shows that there is a slight increase sort of year over year in available funding, our movement in many places, you know, it's kind of exploding. There were 10 years ago, there were many places, many countries where you didn't really have a movement, or you had maybe a couple of activists, but you didn't have organizations. And now there are so many places that there are really sort of this flourishing movement, which of course also means that the funding needs are increasing. So since we have here 4 representatives for 4 completely or different types of institutions, I would like to hear a little bit about how you see what you think of as specific or of the approaches to your type of foundation: a large private foundation, a network of feminist funders, a family foundation, and corporate philanthropy. So Monica, maybe I can turn to you first as representing a large private foundation that's been around for a long time. What are some of the approaches that you think are specific to the type of institution that you represent?
Bueno, yo diría que para la Fundación FOR, en función del movimiento LGBT, lo más importante que podemos hacer en este momento es invertir en el fortalecimiento institucional de este movimiento, ¿verdad? Y invertir de una manera sustancial y con la flexibilidad que requiere este trabajo en este momento. O sea, a través de iniciativas como el programa Build o a través de otras iniciativas de gran escala en la FOR. Yo creo que nuestro intento hasta este momento ha sido tímido, ¿verdad? O ha sido limitado. Así que si hay algo que a mí me gustaría hacer, ¿verdad? O que yo creo que la Fundación debería hacer, es redoblar o triplicar, ¿verdad? Nuestra inversión en el en el poder de este movimiento y de las instituciones que son anclas fundamentales de este movimiento en diferentes regiones del mundo. Y creo que es posiblemente lo más importante que podemos hacer como fundación.
Thank you so much, Monica. And I wish other funders will take your advice here in doubling down or tripling down on investments. Tina, why don't we go to you next for
Sure.
corporate philanthropy?
Yeah, absolutely. A little different, slightly different angle. Like I said earlier, we're much proponents of trust-based philanthropy, and I'm sure a lot of entities and foundations are approaching this as well. By developing a long-standing partnership with the partners through unrestricted and multi-year giving, it makes sense. You know, we're pretty small, we're nimble, we have a small team, and so for us is going deeper with the partner is most helpful, I think, for obviously number one for the nonprofit, but also for us as a team. We're also pretty transparent in setting expectations, right? So even as a funding partnership ends, we still support our alumni partners through various means, connecting them to potentially other funders, other corporate funders, or other entities that could be useful, or contacts. We'd love to, we meet with our partners regularly, and we got rid of some of our administrative burdens like interim reports. We'd love to see more corporate funders, only speaking of corporate funders, to give more unrestricted, and we'd love to see more collective impact and funding collaboratives among corporate funders. For some, this the assumption is corporate funders could be, our budgets are limited, which is pretty much accurate. But I also feel like we have a very, untapped potential, right, in the employee base on the company side. A lot of our partners come to us like, hey, how can we leverage your social media teams or your communications channel, your platform, product? Like, can we get a donation? Of course. I mean, so these are the other ways that corporate funders can think about. So I encourage nonprofits to be creative with that and not just think like, oh, they don't have money, let's move on. Also like the global wide reach of employees, right? And so these are potentially 3,000 individual donors that could be, supporting your organization. So through advocacy, through just education, that is a lot that nonprofits could be working with corporate funders as well, even if our grants sizes could be significantly less.
Thank you so much, Tina. And I have to say, on the trust-based philanthropy and sort of unrestricted funding, I mean, anyone who is involved in nonprofits know that the unrestricted funds are, very valuable. And as an organization that advocates a lot with governments to increase government funding, I always say that you can only absorb more government funds if you also if you can complement it with that unrestricted funding, because it's just too burdensome otherwise. Elizabeth, what are your reflections on this?
Well, Tina, I know that when I'm hearing you speak, I'm just smiling because I'm saying, yes, this is so great. Again, it's such a hearing trust-based philanthropy and the way that trusting those who are in the work to do the work and kind of getting out of the way so they can do that great work, I think is something that women's funds and feminist funders have been doing for a very long time. And again, just so excited. One of our missions is to increase that type of approach in other sectors in philanthropy. So again, so happy to hear you say that. Along those same lines, we recently did a landscape study, one of the largest landscape studies of our network that's been done since 2005. And one of the things that we found that was so interesting in terms of the approach that our network does, number one was that even though, like Tina's, like corporate philanthropy, individually, a lot of our members are relatively small funders. They are in place, they are place-based foundations, and they tend to, on a whole, not be as big a funder or the biggest funder on the block. But we know that collectively they represent about $1.5 billion in annual grant making. And to us, that represents the opportunity and also the kind of nexus of our approach, that working together and leveraging our collective power is one that can actually start to make change. And one of the other things that we saw is that, again, the intentional focus on racial justice and gender justice and LGBTQI, that intersectional piece is not just coming through the grant making, but again, it's institutionalized throughout the different organizations that are part of our membership. The other thing that we saw that's in terms of an approach that's really rooted in values is that our network has increased in terms of women of color leaders that are leading these organizations, leading these foundations. They've increased by 10% since 2020. And right now, the number of women of color leading foundations within our network is around 51%. So it's over half. 73% of that membership are Black women. We know that is something that is, again, completely out of place when you look at the rest of philanthropy. And we think that that's important. You know, it's not just about that trust-based philanthropy. It's important to also see the world as it's reflected in the institutions as well. So again, that's something that is an approach based off of feminist values around who needs to be centered in some of these, in leading the work. So yeah, so I'll stop there. But again, it's definitely, the approach is something that it's not, we don't want to keep it unique to our membership in terms of feminist funders. It's something that we see as something that we are trying to bring to philanthropy writ large in all of our different work, whether it's trust-based philanthropy, whether it's collaboratives and collective giving, whether it's grantee-based decision-making around research led by them and designed by them. And it's a variety of different approaches. It's also including things like impact giving. We're exploring a brand new activity next year where we're going to be looking at how we can leverage impact giving to build a sustainable pot of dollars for grantees to be even more flexible as they're kind of using grant making dollars as just one piece of the approach of types of capital that they need to really make the change in their communities. So again, these are all types of explorations that women's funds and feminist funders are doing, and really excited to kind of be the R&D a little bit of philanthropy to do that and bring those learnings and those successes to the rest of the field.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And finally, Tiffany, we are turning to you, and you're going to be the final commenter here.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think the approach with the Ariadne Getty Foundation, it is again very family based. With the foundation, she works very closely with her children, August and Nats Getty, as well as Nats's wife, Gigi Getty. And, it's whether it's going into the community and seeing what it is the community needs, or whether it's meeting with organizations, that deal with LGBTQIA, or just August, I know recently has also gone into the community and delivered food to different people. It's just it's very community based, very family based, and just getting out there and seeing what is the need that is needed.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the questions that I had that we're not going to get to is like, what would you say to other funders? And if I just summarize what I heard in this last round is we need substantial investments. We need trust-based philanthropy and unrestricted funds wherever possible. Don't discount the smaller donors, because when they come together, it's not small anymore. We need the collective efforts, and we need to institutionalize the intersectional approaches. We need to listen to communities, and we need there to be research and development and trying new things. That is what I heard from you. And thank you so much, all panelists, for joining today in this discussion around philanthropy and how to effectively support the global LGBTIQ movement. so appreciated. A couple of quick announcements. We have next sessions starting at the half hour. I was going to say the time, but we are all in different time zones. At the half hour, there are new sessions starting. And if you enjoyed the session, please let people know on social media. We have another day of Out Summit left, so people can still register. And everything's recorded and will go on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to share that as well. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much for your ongoing partnership and support. It means so much to all of us. Take care and have a wonderful day at Out Summit.